I'll start by saying I have a terrible biological father. He's been a shady person all my life and constantly caused me a lot of grief. This is just one of those examples. When I was 4, my parents split up. My mother and I moved states and they agreed that I would visit my dad every school holidays for a week. But this one particular time, I'd been with him for a few days when I was playing with my cousin at a nearby park. A car pulled up and I recognized the man as one of my dad's friends. He called me over and, without thinking, I ran over and left my cousin at the park. He asked me if I could show him where my dad lived and I agreed and got in his car. I gave directions and didn't notice at all that they weren't following them correctly. Looking back, I didn't really know the way anyhow. After way too long, I did realize that we were getting closer to the city, which is far from my dad's house. We pulled up at a house I didn't recognize, and the man told me to wait in his car. I did. I didn't feel scared at all for some reason. He eventually took me inside, and I definitely started to feel unsafe then. I mainly remember 2 girls passed out with their tops off, and a much older man was feeling them up everywhere. I made eye contact with this man, and he made me sick to my stomach. I had definitely figured out that this was a bad situation by this point. A lady took me into her bedroom and brought me a sandwich. The bread was stale and I wasn't hungry, but I ate it all because I felt bad for her, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what I was thinking about. The lady told me a lot of things I didn't understand, but when she left, I remember thinking my dad was coming to pick me up soon. I fell asleep waiting for him. I wet the bed that night, and no one came to see me the next day until I cried very loudly and banged on the door. The lady came back and yelled at me for stinking up her bedroom, and I asked about my dad. She said that he was coming tonight after he finished work. She didn't offer me a shower or a bath, so I sat in my soiled pants all day. After that, everything turned into just a blur, really. My dad didn't come that night, and I was really terrified, obviously. In my head, I felt like I was there for months. I thought that I was missing school and everyone had forgotten about me. In reality, I was there for like 5 days, and they let me take 1 shower. I don't remember eating much except for boring sandwiches, and I had chips and gravy once. But finally, though, my mum drove across the country to come and get me. After not being able to get a hold of me or my dad for so long, and then me missing my pre-booked flight home, she panicked and came looking for me. And thank God that she did. She found my dad at his girlfriend's house, methed out completely, hiding out. It turns out he owed a lot of drug money to the people who had taken me. They had told him that they had me, but he couldn't afford it, or didn't want me back, whatever it was. The point is that he didn't bother to try and get me back. My amazing mum paid his debt for him after borrowing from a lot of people, and she came to get me back. I remember when someone came into that room and told me that my mum was here, and I walked out and I could smell her. It was the best feeling to feel safe again like that, and she took me home, and I didn't see my dad again for a long time after that. She never called the police. My parents' relationship was very complicated back then, and I fully understand the choices that she made. I'm definitely okay now. I've spoken about this in therapy, and I've come to terms with most of the things that I went through as a child. But still, it's a messed up situation for a 4-year-old girl to have to be in, right? Anyway, I'm grateful that I got out of there pretty much unscathed, and I'm thankful for my mum. So, let me get a couple of things straight. Our little village was the kind of place where everybody knows everyone, and I could count the amount of houses on 2 hands. We were a really quiet and close-knit community, and nothing ever really happened there. Proper out in the sticks sort of stuff. But one night, a few years ago, my mum and my stepdad had gone out to this concert and left me in charge of my little brother and the dog. I wasn't very old, about 14, but I felt really proud that my parents trusted me enough to do that. I thought that I was a pretty cool big brother, and I thought that we'd be doing cool babysitter stuff like staying up late, eating pizza, etc. And I'm kind of glad that we did, because I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't. At about 10:30, the power cut out. I didn't think anything about it at first, because the weather hadn't been great lately, and I figured that had something to do with it. I got some candles out of the cupboard, and I lit them and put some of my favorite songs on. As soon as I sat back down, Sonny, my little brother, turned to me and, being the weird little kid that he was, told me very calmly that somebody was apparently outside. I was a little perturbed by him, but the dog hadn't done anything, so I presumed it was just the neighbors or something. He just shrugged and went back to his drawings. There's a bit of a running joke in our house that you don't actually need a clock with the dog around, because he's such a creature of habit that he will constantly get up at exactly the same time every night to tell you that it's time to initiate his nightly go-to-bed protocol. And it was about 3/4 of an hour after the power went out when my dog decided that now was that time. I told Sonny to go get the dog his biscuit while I let him out for a pee. Now, our kitchen is an extension to the original house, and so, as such, has a flat roof that's comparatively low to the ground, compared to the rest of the house that is, and offers easy access to the bathroom window. As I open the door so the dog could do its thing, Sonny pushes past me in the doorway and whispers, "I know you're out there and I'm calling the police." As he turned around with the biggest, proudest smile you'd ever seen on his face, there was a very distinct rustling coming from just above the doorway. I don't think I'll ever forget the way Sonny's face dropped when he looked just above my head. I looked up. The man sitting on the roof above me panicked, tried to kick me, and then ran off into the next door neighbor's garden, and presumably into the cornfield surrounding our village. I was obviously scared to the bone, and Sonny was bawling his eyes out. I ushered him inside as quickly as I could, and I got a knife from the kitchen. We both went to his room, and I told him to try and get some sleep while I waited for our parents to come back. It was an agonizingly long 4 hours before they did. My stepdad immediately went outside to check to see if everything was all right. I heard them talking about how something had smashed the fuse box. Obviously, we then called the police, but they didn't come until later that day. They did a search of the immediate premises, and they actually found a makeshift bed in a nearby disused barn, along with pictures of silhouettes of us in the shower through the frosted glass window. I think it's pretty safe to say that the whole experience definitely shook us up. We moved out as soon as we could, but I still shut curtains wherever I go, and I see shadows underneath every door that I see. I think that it's affected me long term. Sonny keeps quiet about it, but I'm not sure if that's just because his brain has cut it out, or what. Ever since I can remember, there's this kind of energy around my dad's house. The feeling of being watched or not being alone is a regular one. Everyone who lives there can feel it, but have learned to somehow accept or at least ignore it. There are tons of stories from guests and households, including closing doors, objects moving, and strange noises. I compiled 3 personal stories to share with you, and this is what happened. So when I was 13, my grandfather died, unfortunately, and in the following months, once a day, I felt as if somebody entered my room, checked everything around, and just sort of left. It's difficult to explain, but I always told myself it was my granddad just making sure I was alright, and it gave me some peace of mind. That was the only really good paranormal experience I've had here, and everything else has been, well, a lot more creepy. Now, I know it's not a story per se, but I would like to mention that I've had sleep paralysis here. I'd been in this house and in my already deceased grandfather's bedroom for some time at that point. But fast forward to when I was 21 and I visited my dad and stayed in the guest room since my old room was turned into a studio. This room has the bed against the wall that separates it from the hall, so I could hear everything that happened there. Sometime in the middle of the night, I started hearing noises like some kind of heavy furniture being moved. I scratched it up to just being house noises though, but then it got a bit worse. Steps could be heard in the hall, and besides me, the only person in the house was my dad, whose bedroom was next and in the opposite direction from the sound the footsteps were coming from. The next thing I heard was the door handle moving frantically up and down as if someone was trying to open the door, and as soon as I turned the lights on, the movement stopped. Now that I was sure that I wasn't imagining it, I locked the door and went back to bed with the lights still on. And not even 2 minutes later, the door handle started to rattle again, but even more violently this time. I could see the metal plaques that held it together being separated from the door itself, and that's when I started to scream for my dad. It took me a good minute to open the door for him when he got there, and I'm not ashamed to say that I took my mattress to his room and I slept there that night. In the morning, my dad and I checked the door handle and the screws, and they had actually been loosened from all the rattling. A couple of days later, I called my grandmother, who also lives at the house but was away on a trip, to tell her what had happened. Turns out that she had experienced the same thing in the same bedroom months before. Needless to say, I never slept alone when I visited the following years, and I always slept and stayed with my grandma in her room. Back when I was in the 3rd grade, there was a hill with a playground at the top. One day, while everybody was playing at the park, as it was recess, this middle-aged man wearing nothing but cargo shorts came to the bottom of the hill and leaned over a fence that was there. He then began to call the kids over to him, and when the kids came over, he wrapped them up in blue tape, mainly around their hands. This went on for about 15 minutes when the 4th grade science teacher, the saint that she is, began to run down the guy. Now, this woman can be very intimidating when she wants to be. She later became the principal, in fact. But anyway, the second this guy saw her, he walked away. He obviously didn't care about getting caught, but the whole situation was a weird one, and when I reflect back on it, it seems obvious that this guy was trying to kidnap a whole bunch of kids. This may be a bit of a ramble of thoughts, but after recently stumbling upon this place, I finally felt like I'd found a place where I could offer something that my family and I experienced a few years ago that, to this day, gives me the creeps. I've been camping, solo backpacking, and hunting my whole life in Oregon, and felt comfortable in the woods and have a deep respect for nature. A few years ago, my wife and daughter and 2 German Shepherds went camping north of Mount Jefferson, Oregon. I have included the coordinates of our campsite, which we found to be the perfect setup for us, and our 2 dogs too, who need the privacy since they're pretty intimidating to other dog owners and can be loud when spooked. It was not an established campsite, just a nice horseshoe off of a USFS road that had flat ground full trees and a fire pit. The first night, my daughter wanted to sleep by herself in a 2-man tent right next to ours. It was maybe 2 feet away, I would guess, from me and my wife's tent. We made the male German Shepherd, Guts is his name, sleep with her in the tent. That whole first night, neither my wife or I could sleep for some reason, because we both could have sworn that we heard footsteps, and they were heavy, not like typical forest critters scampering around in the night. I was well armed because I was paranoid from reading recently before departing about a dad in California who was shot and killed in a tent next to his 2 infant daughters. Needless to say, both my wife and I had 2 pistols and my rifle with me. The dogs are great at detection, and that's why I felt my daughter could sleep alone, because Guts is completely fearless and nothing would lay a hand on her without a battle to the death. But all in all, nothing but bad vibes and loud footsteps occurred that night, which I ultimately decided was deer or maybe some sort of an elk. Day 2, morning, we go for a walk down the road and maybe 300 feet away see the circle area in the photo. I see an abandoned road where a rusted gate post, a gate was missing, was covered in vegetation. Something of blue color caught my eye, and Guts immediately takes off running down this abandoned road. My heart begins to race because I think it's another family camping like us, and he's going to get himself shot or scare some innocent people to death, so I chase after him as fast as I can, and the rest follow. He stops after 20 feet into the road, and me yelling his name, but I've covered just enough distance to see that there's nobody there, and something is really off about this site. I yell out, "Hello? Is anyone there? Sorry about the dog." I got no response. My curiosity gets the best of me, and I have to see what the site conditions were. As I got closer, I know something is wrong, though. It had all the necessities for a campsite, including a cooler, propane burner, tent, blankets, folding table, but every single item had been just completely destroyed, smashed and torn from what appeared to be claw marks. We all walked around in circles, puzzled why anyone would leave all the camping gear behind, including an expensive REI tent. I figured, well, someone left in a hurry and animals got to the rest as the only logical explanation. Still, a propane tank and cooler were flattened by something. It certainly wasn't snowpack with tree coverage in that spot. As the afternoon rolls in and me and my daughter are playing ball at the campsite, and my wife goes walking maybe 70 feet north to do her business, I don't have a direct line of sight on her, but all of a sudden I see Guts make a mad dash straight towards her. Normally he would always be with me unless he's called over, and she didn't call for him. His speed and focus caught my attention though, and I knew immediately that something weird was going on, so I ran over there and my wife starts jogging at me, and I immediately draw my pistol. Guts has completely continued running in the forest another 100 feet before I call him and he stopped. My other dog, Leah, who never misses the opportunity to be the pack leader, is not taking point. I've had her for 7 years, and this was the first time in her life, honestly, that she refused to leave my daughter's side. She was full hair raised, though, and also attached to us at the hip. Again, anytime that we hike or play, Leah is up front, bossing everyone in her path, and pauses to look to see where we were and continues. I asked my wife what happened, and she said, I was trying to pee, and all of a sudden I just felt all my hairs raise, and I just knew that somebody was watching me. And then I saw Guts running towards me, and I just got up to move towards you. We spent 10 minutes looking for signs of anything, but saw no trails. No broken branches, nothing to point to what and where something went. So we just decided that we're spending one more night since it's too late to pack up and drive, but we'll all be in the big tent together tonight. Before we go to bed, though, I put a rope with a makeshift coin alarm around the perimeter of our campsite. I actually used a mint can and some coins and keys from our truck, and zip-tied it so anything hitting the rope gave a little jingle. Very unsophisticated, but it put my wife at ease. As I go to tie my last corner off at the tree near our tent, our third mystery item unveils itself, because it looks like someone has done the same exact thing that I've done with a rope that was so old and brown that I didn't see it at first. It was broken and only had a few pieces remaining, but sure enough it was tied at roughly the same height, 8 to 10 inches off the ground, and even had a few rusted washers on it. I immediately felt like somebody had stayed here before and put the same makeshift warning system on the same tree that I had maybe 10 or 15 years ago, based on the condition of the rope. Perhaps my paranoia has now reached a new height, but I had to make sure the girls felt that we were safe, and at the time, the only thing that I could think of was when the evening came around. I made them sit in the truck, and I fired a clip of my .45 into the dirt as a signal to whatever was out there that we were armed. I reassured the girls that anybody listening to that now knows that we have 2 wolves and are armed, and we're too risky of a target so we can sleep safely. That night, we heard no footsteps, and the dogs never perked up and barked. We left early the next morning. But fast forward to today, and I watched the Amazon Missing 411 Hunted documentary, and I noticed the cluster smack dab close to where we actually camped that weekend. And it was at this point that a flood of dread rushes over me as I think of that mysterious abandoned campsite with the ripped tent and the smashed cooler in the cook-up. We've been camping since then and have enjoyed the beauty of NW many times, but there was something there at that place that possibly took or harmed somebody else less than 300 feet away from where we camped, and we all thank our lucky stars that Guts was doing his thing so well that afternoon. So I'm a very, very active skater, and I often go out to street spots to try and skate them. A lot of the time I meet some less than unsavory people, but this time it just took the cake. So it's around 6:30 p.m, perfect day for skating, and I'm just getting a spot around a public park called Rosa Park Circle. I was doing my thing when this tall man came up to me and told me that I was doing a good job. The creepy man said that his name was Jay, and I said that my name was Satan, trying to be a jackass. He said, "Hey, you're doing a really good job." "Oh, thanks. I've been working on my skating for a while now, and I think I'm doing a really good job recently. I tend to trust people too much." "Yeah, I can see that. My name's Jay. I'm 55 years old and I'm bi." At this point, I kind of knew what was coming. I'm pretty good at detecting people's implications, thankfully. But throughout this entire conversation, he kept mentioning his sexuality, and I tried my absolute best to just try and get out of the conversation when I could. I was trying to do a few tricks down a small ledge. The guy was just staring at me while I was doing it, and I must admit that it felt really uncomfortable. He pulled me aside one more time, and this is what he said. "Listen, I really like you. I know you're only 15, but as long as you consent, we can still hook up, okay?" No, we can't. I'm only 14 and the consent age is 16. Plus, I'm not really comfortable with the things that you're saying, and I need to go home anyways. It was nice meeting you, but I need to go." "Okay, but remember not to tell anybody, okay?" This happened today, and obviously I told my parents. After they get off the phone with my sister, they're going to be making a police report about this man. I was pretty livid on my way home, and it didn't help that my entire playlist on YouTube is full of hard rock. So in other words, I was kind of steaming when I got home. I did go back to skate there again as well, and wouldn't you know it, he told me that we were such good friends and that he was drunk and that he was really sorry and all that. But I just skated past and looped around and took a picture. I think he was still drunk because he straight up rattled off his name. But thankfully, me and my mum were on the phone with a detective recently, and they're apparently going to follow it up. So I got back from Iraq not too long ago, and I thought that I would share my experiences. We get into the country, and it's nothing big, just doing our jobs in the desert. Due to the nature of my job or mission, I was confined to the fob. I worked nights the whole tour, so my work hours were 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. As you can imagine, I slept during the day. Now, the base was a premier duty station for the Iraqi military. It was built in the 70s or 80s to accommodate the expanding army under Saddam's rule. So Gulf War 91 happens and we bombed it out. 03 we invade again, and guess what? Bombed out and then occupied until 2011 when given back to the Iraqis. 2014 bombed out again because ISIS took over it and was using it as a death camp. Olympic swim pools on location were full of bodies, and there was a steamroller used for running people over. 2014 now occupied by the Iraqi army. And so, as you can imagine, this could be a hotbed of stuff. So the first occurrence, it was about a month into our tour, and I was dead asleep in my room. We sleep in a 6x6 room with a roommate. I was fortunate enough to never see him since we had opposite shifts. I was racked out with my back to the center of the room, and I woke up to a sort of slight touch or grab to the back of my arm. I rolled over to see that it was a 6'4" looking all-black shadow standing 6 feet from me. I actually wear glasses and my vision is absolutely awful sometimes, so assuming it was one of my soldiers waking me up, I roll back over after putting on my glasses, and when I do, nothing was there. So tripped out, I got a hold of my roommate, and he chalks it up to some bad dream, and so did I. 2 months go by, and business as usual. I go to work at 9, and my roommate settles in. Taking advantage of him being alone, he attempts to masturbate one night too. After finishing, he sits up trying to clean up and head up to the shower, and the ambient light of his headlight lights up my end of the room. He notices something out of the corner of his eye, though, and looks to see what he said was a big-ass guy, big like its feet portion were hanging off our bed. It's like a college dorm-sized twin bed, and apparently it was all black. So pretty much a shadow dude laying on my bed. He said fight or flight hit him, and because he was cleaning off after masturbating, he froze up. After looking away and back again when trying to find the actual light switch, it was gone. So he believed it after that, and thought that it wasn't just a dream. Well, we told our PSG, platoon sergeant, at chow the next day, and he was amused and sort of interested too. He's a believer in the paranormal and decided to speak his part. According to him, at this point in the tour, about 3 months in, he's seen someone leave my room at odd times in the middle of the day, times that I'm sleeping, and walk to the room across from us. The thing about the room across, though, is that it had a padlocked plywood door and was always locked because the guys who slept there were in Syria, so much of the gear that they had to leave behind was still in there. You can't actually get in without hopping the plywood walls. But anyway, that was the extent of the creepy stuff with my living space. I don't know if it was a djinn or whatever you call it, but my interpreter said that it probably was, since it kept getting close to me and manifested physically. If I could describe it, I guess it would look similar to the shadow dude captured on the Ghosts of Carmel, Maine YouTube channel. Not spot on because I saw the shadow silhouette of a rather jacked and tall person instead of that. But the next occurrence was weird. So I was taking a crap in the porch johns at night, and you'd hear footsteps or whispers around you sometimes. Know too that when you're in there next to the watchtower, that's 150 to 300 meters away from another group of soldiers, it's at 3 a.m., there's nobody awake to mess with you except the other guy in the tower. He can't actually abandon his watch since he's covering. The third thing that happened was also weird. I attended a sleep aid class with the medics and whatnot since I was having trouble sleeping soundly, and in the group there were soldiers waking up with bad dreams and with scratches on them sometimes, some of which were bad enough that they bled too, and it dried during their sleep though. They only discovered it after they woke up to bloody sheets. Nobody really ever said anything about this though, other than the medics asking if he needs to take a look at it. But the entry point guys who man a big gate with obstacles would also hear commotions like banging on the metal at the main gate at night, and would go to check it out, but nothing would ever come of it. Towers would report people walking in the open area around the perimeter at night. Some would notice something in their night vision or in the darkness that their eyes adjusted to, but when the sergeant on guard or other response elements would check it, there would be nothing there. Perhaps one of the spookier things, though, was a woman screaming was reported from towers in the vicinity of a bombed-out bunker, and also an abandoned, half-destroyed building on the far end of the FOB. SOG responded, and we had no personal report of a rape or an assault or anything. Yes, that happens out there, and nobody came up missing or astray either. The tower didn't report anyone in the area either, other than SOJs and relief around that time. Anyway, there's my spooky experiences from Iraq that some of you guys might be interested in. Feel free to leave some questions in the comment section below, and I'll see if I can get to them. Thanks for listening. I used to deliver pizzas when in college, and I delivered this order to this house, and the guy opened the door and was like, "Honey, the pizza is here." But the house was obviously empty. Like, nothing in this house. No furniture, no rugs, no nothing. Literally just floor and walls. It was a massive place too, and abandoned. No noise whatsoever. But the guy told me to come in while he goes to get his wallet, and he asks me to stand in a very specific spot and tells me don't move. Then he locks the door, and then he walks to another room to get his wallet and keeps looking back at me. I'm waiting for like 10 minutes and nothing. I walk towards the corner the guy went to and get close to this door, and I hear the guy talking about me, like physically talking, describing me, and keep saying it'll be easy. And that was when I bolted, found the back door, hopped the fence, and I quit that very day. I never delivered anything ever again after that too, because, well, that was just too much for me.